I'm back with Dr. Michael Schuckers, a professor of statistics at St. Lawrence University in New York. In addition to his work analyzing NHL stats, he works with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, helping the government and private industry develop more reliable biometric devices like iris scanners and fingerprint scanners. So fingerprints are what people probably are most associated with biometrics. You know, in TV you watch the police take the fingerprint and stick it in the computer. Within a few seconds, they have a perfect match. Is that a fair depiction of reality? Is that how it really works?
I think that's probably not. In terms of sort of forensic work, which you just described, in terms of sort of a crime scene where a fingerprint is lifted, that process takes a whole lot longer, generally, because you're searching a much larger database. So, for example, if we're running something against the FBI database, that FBI database has a very, very large number of fingerprints. And so to be able to run a lifted print or a latent print against that database takes quite a period of time.
Right. But even in terms of just the reliability of that, I mean, I know that, like at Brandon Mayfield, the lawyer in Oregon a couple of years ago, who 3 FBI fingerprint analysts said that he was associated with the Madrid bombing, the train bombing. Turned out he wasn't, because it's in that case sort of revealed that it's not necessarily yes or no. There's 5-point match, 6-point match,
right.
and there's a certain just sort of reliability you have. And do you, like in that case, how would the FBI get it so wrong and end up going after an innocent man like that?
Again, the ability of the FBI is as good as the system there. And so I guess I'm not familiar with the quality of the print that was lifted. But if you have something that's a poor quality print, then potentially when you run it against a database as large as the FBI's, then it could possibly be matching because there's not as much information in something that is lifted like that. If it's not a full fingerprint, could potentially match multiple fingerprints within that system.
Well, there's even discussion, and we did a story at 60 Minutes a few years ago about this, that lawyers are starting to question the scientific reliability of things like fingerprint. In the U.S., there's the Brady rule that you have to meet a certain scientific kind of standard that generally is accepted.
Right.
And I mean, in Sweden, I have some facts here, like in Sweden, this 7-point match is what's accepted.
Right.
In Italy, 16-point match. In Brazil, it's a 30-point match.
Right.
I mean, as a mathematician, you probably that must drive you crazy that there's no consistency to what's considered a match or not a match.
Right. Recently in the U.S., the National Academy of Sciences issued a report looking at some of the issues here and suggesting that, indeed, there are some gaps and some places where some additional research is needed to be able to evaluate, how many sort of minutiae or how many points do we need in order to say with a great deal of confidence that, indeed, we do have a match.
So what's the role of a mathematician here? This is something you think of as an engineering issue or a legal issue.
Right.
What do you do in terms of this?
So in terms of these devices, the idea here is to look at performance. Generally, what we have is performance from a test bed. So often we have a database that is fairly small, maybe 1,000, maybe 100, and we're evaluating the performance of a system, a fingerprint reader, on that small database. And one of the things that we're working on now is to really be better at taking what we know from the performance on that database and projecting it to a much larger database. So databases now in orders of magnitude of the millions, and saying, okay, this is how well we do in terms of falsely matching those that we shouldn't and incorrectly matching those that we should. And then saying, okay, this is our performance at a small database. How is that going to project? Because testing is a very expensive thing. To get human beings to come in, to have them give up their iris image or fingerprint image takes a good deal of time. And so the mathematical and the statistical properties that we can get from a small database to try and project to the large is really an ongoing area.
Well, you mentioned iris. I mean, the other things that probably a lot of our viewers are familiar with, and there are sort of there's vein scans, there's all sorts of things,
right.
but the other two I think that most people are aware of are facial recognition and iris
Correct.
Scanning.
Yep.
In Canada, you can even register for the Nexus and have an iris scan as you go through the border. You don't even have to show your passport. How reliable are those? Like, particularly facial recognition, because you hear about law enforcement and intelligence folks using this in crowds. Is that an accurate method?
It is an accurate method, but it is very much dependent upon the context. So if you have someone who is at a border crossing, they want to cross, so they are motivated to do well, then facial recognition, you're usually going to get someone who is standing there, you're going to get a good image of them. If we talk about a facial recognition system of sort of a subway system where you have 20 people passing a station a minute, then you're going to have not as good images, your performance is going to degrade. Right. Generally, in terms of these devices, if we say that we've got a good collection process, then we tend to think of iris as the best, followed by fingerprint, followed by face.
Iris is actually better than fingerprint.
Iris is generally considered for biometrics, not for forensics.
Right,
so forensic is a slightly different thing, because forensics, you generally will take a longer time to make a better decision.
So you see iris being used more and more in the future?
I think that that's likely to happen.
Well, we're out of time, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Dr. Schuckers' website is statssportsconsulting.com. If you have a question or comment for us, we'd love to hear from you. Here's how you can get in touch with us.